Cool Hand Podcast, something you got to deal with. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host. My name is Q. What part of town are we in?
This would be the South Hills, Brookline,
All right.
Castle Shannon area.
We are in the South Hills, Brookline, Castle, Shannon area. And we have a very special guest today who is in a field that I respect, that I appreciate, and we're going to learn about it. We're going to learn about the business and in the world of fitness. Guest. And I'm in his place of business. I'm also a guest, but guest to the show, please introduce yourself.
All right, so my name is Dill and like you said, I'm a gym owner here in the Brookline area in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. I've been in business here since 2018. I'm a father of two. I'm a husband for almost 2 years now. Those would be the big things. Those would be the kind of, I guess, the general outline of who I am.
All right. Thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for agreeing to, let me in your place of business. I'm excited to talk about your business. What is the name of this place? Where are we at?
This is Brick by Brick Training.
Brick by Brick Training. So let's take things back a little bit before we talk about Brick by Brick Training and how you got into this field. Are you originally from this area?
Yes, I grew up in Brookline. I lived on Queensboro when I was a little kid, which was like, I guess first I lived on Castlegate, which is like a 5-minute walk down the street. Then I lived on Queensboro, which is like a 3-minute walk down the street. And then for most of my childhood, I lived like literally just a block over there.
Okay.
So I'm very comfortable and familiar with like where I have my business now, which has been great for a lot of reasons, but yeah.
Yeah, you have familiarity.
Yeah, for sure.
You're the hometown kid.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay, and what was life like for you growing up in this area?
Honestly, I can't think of many bad things to say. I mean, I have a pretty good outlook, I think, of how my childhood was. I feel like it's probably like most of the kids that I remember, who some I'm still friends with to this day, some actually train here in the gym. But a lot of sports when I was a kid, that's probably what sort of, kind of got me to where I am today. But, I played football and baseball when I was a kid, for the Brookline Knights and little league teams here. And, I mean, I was busy, always kind of outside, riding my bike and things like that. And, it was good. It's a good childhood, I think.
So do you think, just being active as a youth, do you think that's where your love for fitness came in?
I don't know. I feel there's definitely like stages of what fitness was like in my life, and then kind of like how much I actually enjoyed it in one way or another. Because I would say up until high school, up through high school, fitness was probably more of a complementary thing in my life to being involved in sports and stuff like that. I certainly wasn't like amazing at sports, but I was like pretty decent. I played like baseball, like I said, when I was a little kid, and I did a lot of like instructional and one-on-one stuff like that. And played with a lot of kids who were older than me. I knew even at that age that I was pretty good, and because of that, particularly my dad always made sure I trained a lot and stuff like that to kind of make sure I was doing the best I could in these things. He definitely like instilled that it was important to work hard in terms of getting stronger and building muscle and stuff like that. I don't think he's particularly amazingly knowledgeable at the things that we did. That's kind of part of it. I definitely started off like training in a way I think probably many people do, like bro type stuff where you try like mimicking people that you definitely should not mimic. Like when I was a little kid, it was like bodybuilders and stuff like that, like Ronnie Coleman and those guys, like those big, massive, giant guys that are, that's their career. Yeah. And that's what I tried doing when I was like 11 years old, which isn't going to work.
Probably horrible.
But it taught me way more good stuff than it did bad stuff.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of like, that was like the first seed of like fitness was being in my garage at home with, you know, weight barbells and dumbbells. All the dumbbells I have are still the ones that were back then.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those have been around forever and ever and ever. But yeah, it all kind of started from that.
Okay. So at what point in your life did you think, I want to get into this field? Did you have like another passion before this?
So I would say so I went to Brashear High School, which is like the public school kind of like for kids in this area. And for the most part through that, I did pretty well in school. I was thinking I was going to be on track towards being like an English teacher.
Okay.
I always like to read, like to write. I kind of, you know, I had a good time kind of getting lost in books and writing a lot and stuff like that. And so I went to University of Pittsburgh. I went there initially. The game plan was to be an English teacher. And whether or not I was like smart enough to realize at the time, or if it was just a happy accident, for whatever reason, I made sure to like get close to that job while I was in school, because I wanted to make sure that was actually what I wanted to do. So there's a school on campus in Pittsburgh called the Falk School, where they have young kids there who are like all amazingly talented, super smart, super bright. They all listen, they're all disciplined, they're all great kids. And so I went there to like be like an aide, an assistant, you know, something like that, like while I was in college. And I did not enjoy it at all. And I was like, okay, if I don't like this, I know like if I graduate and I become a teacher, it ain't gonna be with kids like this. It's gonna be like where I went to school, where it's a wide spectrum of like, you know, kids that you're gonna be handling, and you're probably gonna be way outnumbered, like one teacher to like 30 kids, you know. And so I had to change my plan from there. And at that time, there was a lot of people who, because I was always into fitness. It was, like I said, it was just never like really like the front of my mind. And so there were people who I was reading a lot of back then. There's a guy like, his name's Zach Evanesh out in New Jersey who owns a gym. He's owned a gym for a long time. There's a guy, Joe DeFranco. And those kind of names, and there's other names too, but those two big names were people who I listened to a lot back then and read a lot of stuff. And they were the first ones who made like this like garage type gym. Because this was kind of simultaneous and a little bit before like CrossFit like just exploded.
Gotcha.
And like this aesthetic of what I do, because it's definitely different from what I do, but like in terms of like the aesthetic, kind of similar. It's not like in this, you know, big giant commercial gym with tons of machines and things like that. You know, much smaller, much more intimate. So at that time, I was reading and watching a lot of stuff from those guys. So I kind of already knew that was a possible thing to make a career. And I don't know, I remember I had a meeting with my advisor, like my end of my freshman year, I think, maybe towards the beginning of my sophomore year, I can't remember when, but it was early on, and she was like, how's things going? And I was like, I don't like this really. She was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I'm interested in this. And to her credit, she like did not dissuade me at all. She was like, cool, this is what you want to do then. And she kind of led me into like exercise science degree and all the stuff I had to do to graduate with that stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you end up graduating, is it a bachelor's degree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bachelor's degree of exercise science with a minor in fitness, I think it was.
That's what the
website actually
website
exists. Yeah.
That's what the website says.
A minor in fitness.
Minor in fitness. So bachelor's in health and physical activity.
Yes.
And minor in fitness.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say you have, I would say, thorough knowledge of what you are, the business that you run. You know, because a lot of things are, it's a social media driven world these days.
For sure.
And there's a lot of, like you said, bro stuff out there.
Yep.
A lot of weird stuff. And this is why I wanted to talk to you too, because you have, you know, education behind it, not just, well, you know.
Yep.
So let's talk about, you know, post graduating, what was the goal? What was the plan? Where did you think you would be after graduating college?
Well, I want to sidetrack 1 second.
Absolutely.
Just because, and I enjoyed my time at Pitt. I did appreciate it. I did learn a lot. But I would say, particularly just for what I do, like the information that I use on a day-to-day basis and like the knowledge that I kind of draw from, I would say overwhelmingly is not from my time in college. Doesn't mean it was a bad thing at all. I learned a lot. A lot of people in my program used it as like a stepping stool to like physical therapy school and stuff like that. So it was probably much more useful for them. Just in terms of it wasn't specifically geared towards someone that was going to end up doing what I do.
Gotcha.
But it was still very helpful for sure, definitely. But then I already forgot
Oh, no
your
problem.
question.
No, thank you for elaborating on that. Let me ask you this before I even go back to my question.
Okay.
So, for somebody who would want to be a personal trainer, business aspect aside, owning a business is two different things. So, what would you recommend for somebody who would want to be a personal trainer or get into the field, education-wise?
I think the best way of doing it in this stage of the game, in terms of like where the industry is and where, you know, colleges are set up the way that they're set up, it's probably a best bet for somebody to find, and this is kind of actually what I ended up doing after college, find someone that you respect and like really enjoy what they do, like in terms of like personal training, coaching, strength and conditioning. There's just kind of a lot of different like little niches inside of that group. You know, because hopefully if you enjoy it and you want to do it, then you're probably, you know, especially in the internet age, you're probably watching somebody, learning from somebody. I would find that person and do whatever it takes to get in front of that person and learn from them directly. Which, for the most part, at first, probably means like learning for free for a while, you know, being an intern of some sort. The tough thing is, a lot of times, depending on, especially if you're going to work in, you know, like a physical therapy type field, like a strength and conditioning type field, you're going to need a college degree. So those sort of things kind of work hand in hand. So it's not necessarily one or the other, but I would just always have in your mind, like, this degree is great, but you got to have it backed up with like working hands-on and learning from somebody who's doing something similar to what you want to do. Because I mean, I know like I've been in business for 5 years, and it's on the website, so maybe they looked at the website, but I think only one person has ever asked me if I have a degree, if, you know, about my time in college, which doesn't, all that means to me though is that it kind of bums me out that a personal trainer, a coach, you know, it is what it is. It's not seen as something that's like super professional. You know, it's not as highly touted as these other kind of health and wellness professions that you could go into, like physical therapy, you know, like a nutritionist, and people that work in those more specific like medical type fields. So that's kind of like where it's a little, you know, you need both. I think it's good to have both for sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So post college,
yeah,
where did you want to go? Where did you think you would be? What was your game plan after graduating?
So pretty like quickly into it was junior and senior year predominantly was doing that program, the health physical activity program. And in that stretch of time, if I had to remember, I would say probably pretty early on in that, I knew that I wanted to own a gym.
Okay.
So I knew the whole time that was what was going to happen at some point. So then we had an internship process as part of the program, which was great because it kind of forces you to get in front of somebody, like I said. So I tried to do my internship through the program, through this guy who I ended up working for after college. His name's Rick Damon. He owns a gym up in Beaver County.
Okay.
And the reason I wanted to do it for him is because it's actually like a funny story how I learned about him. But he runs a gym similar to this, small group training, works with kind of like a wide demographic, but it's him running it, you know, and wasn't able to get it through him. And I think if I had to remember correctly, I can't remember if they told me this outright or not, or if it was his speculation as to why Pitt didn't clear the internship through him. It was because he does not have a college degree. I don't think he either doesn't have a college degree or he doesn't have a college degree in this field. So they said no. All right. So then I went and I got an internship through Mount Lebanon High School through their strength and conditioning program under a guy named Frank Cremonese. And so it's not like I'm disappointed because it was great that I did that internship. I learned a lot through him. He's an awesome guy. And I also, because at the time I was, flirting with the idea of like, well, maybe working in a school is an option too, something like that. But I saw quickly there that that's not something that I would want to do. Yeah. I enjoyed it for what it was, for what I was doing, and working with a ton of different kids, getting like a lot of very valuable time spent coaching kids and spending time with like youth athletes. But it was not something that I was going to see myself doing in the long run.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was an internship, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what was your first job out of school? Your first paid job,
Gotcha.
paid gig?
So I'm remembering, no, okay. Because during college, I worked at like McDonald's, and I worked on campus doing anything and everything, and then I worked at Get-Go, and that was all during college. So by the time I graduated, I juggled for a few years in the end of college and a few years after college. I actually coached football. I helped coach football at my high school, Bashir High School. So I did that. But the first job I did after college would have been through that guy I mentioned, Rick Damon. Because when I reached out to him initially about the internship, and that ended up not happening, he told me, he's like, hey, don't lose touch. Like, as soon as you're done, like, come up here. And I had to do an internship process through him. So whether I exceeded his expectations or not, I'm not sure. But when I went up there, he was in the middle process of moving from a gym probably the size of this, maybe even a little smaller, honestly, to a 7,000 square foot gym.
Okay.
So huge change. So conveniently enough, I was a lot of like manual labor help. I had a lot of time coaching people for sure. I got a lot of work on that. But in that span of time, there was a lot of work that needed done to like the new place of like getting it ready to open up his next gym. So I spent a lot of time there. So I think it was originally intended to be like a 4 to 6 month unpaid internship, and then it would have like kind of flowed into like a base, coaching position type stuff like that. But I think he only didn't pay me for like 1, maybe 2 months. Yeah. Okay. And then he started paying me a little bit. So that was definitely. I don't think I expected that right away, but I wasn't going to say no.
Yeah. So you're out of school at this point. You're helping out Rick Damon, right? That's his name.
And I was still training people out of my parents' garage. I didn't even talk about that yet.
Gotcha.
That's kind of happening throughout this entire span of time.
Okay. So meanwhile, parents' garage,
Yes.
training people, getting some money, getting a little bit of money here and there.
Yeah.
So when it comes to personal training, especially in the age that we're in,
Yeah.
and I'm 29, around 1920, I was into it as to like, is this something that I want to do? So 10 years ago, I felt like the market might have been, there's a lot of people in it.
Yeah.
So how lucrative is being a personal trainer?
It probably totally depends on like, because there's so many factors. Because you could be a personal trainer in like a big box gym, like an LA Fitness type, setup, and I worked at an Anytime Fitness. Okay. So look, I actually already lied to you. I think that was my first job outside of college.
Okay.
I was a personal trainer at Anytime Fitness for like 2 months, and I was like, no.
Not for you.
No. Yeah, I think because it was like right before I ended up going up to Beaver County with Rick, because I think he had like a start date for me. Okay. And I was like, all right, well, in the meantime, I'll try something. And yeah, I hated that. So if you're working in that context, it probably depends on the gym. Like some gyms may either pay their trainers directly a certain rate, or it's like, hey, you pay the gym a certain amount for essentially like renting out the space.
Okay.
And having it as like your pool of clientele that you could hopefully get people to use your personal training services, and then you probably make any amount of money that you make from there. I think it's a tough question to answer because it's like totally up to you. Like, I mean, like I own my own business, so like I set the prices. So that's all up to me how much I end up making out of it, and like, learning all the things that are entailed there. But in terms of, how lucrative is it for a person like maybe just starting out? I mean, if you're in person in those, in those personal training jobs, if I had to guess, I remember seeing like estimates, and I think they're pretty accurate from like the time that I experienced them there. It's not very lucrative at first, and I would say overall for most people, it's probably not very lucrative. Like, it's probably like you're talking like $50,000 or less is the average income of personal training. The tough thing is that takes like the average, which in my opinion probably has a lot of people that aren't very good at what they do. Yeah. Because there are plenty of people that have a great livelihood and great career being a personal trainer. Even people who personal train like out of those gyms. There's a guy named Dean Somerset, and he I think he's out in California or something like that. But he's one of these guys that's a pretty knowledgeable guy, and he's one of the kind of leaders like in the industry essentially of personal training and things like that. But he's been working out of like just a big box gym setup. It's like, as far as I know, like the whole time, forever. Gotcha. And he makes a great living. Yeah. Just because of the nature of what I do, most of the people that I kind of know about, more or less like they own their own gym, things like that. But there's also a lot of like online personal trainers.
Okay, I didn't even consider that.
That's a huge thing. And that's, I think, more or less a great thing, but it's like anything else with online, it's like, man, the range is so wide of like excellence to crap of what you're gonna get. And it's a little harder to know maybe because there's so much stuff out there, and I think a lot of people just don't know what they're looking for when they're looking for a personal trainer. So it kind of just comes down to like just being a little uninformed. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I asked that because, and this kind of transitions into you owning your own business. Being a personal trainer now, I would see the ones, I remember like in LA Fitness when I was like 14 and just getting into LA Fitness. It was like the trainers would hound people. Yeah. And they'd be like, real charismatic and stuff. And I was a kid, so they weren't bothering me. Yeah. But, it's like they were like hunting. Yeah. Hunting for someone to train. And it kind of makes sense when you say, it might be paying for, paying, or
it's up to them
if
to
it's
get
a commission type thing. And it seems hard. That's why I asked that question, not to like, pocket check you, like how much money you making?
No, totally. No, because it's a very fair question because, I mean, especially like you think of like when you're a kid looking into getting into things, hopefully one, you're looking into doing something because you love it and you enjoy it. That's got to be like the most important thing. But like a huge part of that is definitely like, okay, what sort of lifestyle will this afford me? And how hard will it be to, I know people who are like engineers and who work like in the tech space. You start off and like, that's like a 100,000 plus job that you might start off with. But there's benefits and drawbacks of that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like something that it's going to be predominantly, totally on you, the person, as far as like what you're getting paid. And if it's not, if you're in a setup where like you're getting paid like a salary, or like there's like kind of like a set price to expect for like what you're going to earn, it's probably pretty low, because like in most gyms, there's just not a lot of people taking advantage of personal training.
Yeah.
But there's tons of different gyms, so
right.
it depends for sure.
It's rough. So, and one of the things is when I would imagine as a personal trainer, and even like in the podcasting space, you need to grow. If you're doing it, a specialized thing, you need to grow somewhat of a community, somewhat of a relationship with people to where they want to keep coming back to you. There's 1,000 personal trainers and gyms out there that people can go to. So transitioning into your gym, you were working out of your parents' garage for a while. Now, at what year is this when you're with Rick Damon?
Yeah.
And then you decided to go full time and start your own gym. What year are we talking?
So if I graduated Pitt 2015, I'm gonna say I probably started with Rick later that year. So towards the end of 2015, and I worked for him up until the end of 2017. So about 2 years. Yeah, about 2 years I was with him.
Okay.
And while I was doing that, because the nature of owning a gym too, I mean, your service you're providing is for people to train with you. Well, people want to train early in the morning, the middle of the morning, afternoon, evening. So you have to be able to accommodate that. So at the time, I moved in with my wife, Erin. We got our first apartment together in Carnegie, and so I would drive up to DST. It's called DST, it's Damon Strength Training.
Okay.
So I would drive up to DST early in the morning at I think I used to get up at like 3:50 a.m. those days. Drive up there for either a 1 hour or 2 hour kind of time slot that people would train in. Come back, and I would train people out of my parents' garage, like in the middle of the day. And then I would head back in the afternoon and evening to DST and do that up until, I think usually, if I remember correctly, it was up until 8. I think sometimes it was up until 9 p.m. and then come back home.
That's a long day. It's a very long day.
It's a long day, but it's not very different from what I do now either. So there's definitely, and that's not ideal. That's not me glamorizing that in any way, because it's not ideal, not sustainable. You can't do that forever.
Yeah.
But you do have to do that for some period of time.
Yeah, there's a grind. Yeah, there's like a grind period. You gotta
certainly have to.
You gotta get your building blocks. So, at what point did you leave DST?
Yes.
And look into a space and say, I'm gonna try this on my own full time.
So like I said, the whole time in varying degrees. So I think if I had to imagine, probably sometimes I was like very adamant, sometimes maybe I was a little less adamant, but in varying degrees, I always knew that I wanted to do this. I wanted to own my own gym. So that was always in my head. So when I took that internship with Rick, he was aware of that too. So it wasn't like he wasn't informed. And I'm pretty sure that was like one of the first things I told him too, was, I wanted to come to you because, I mean, you did this. There's a lot I could learn from someone like him, because he didn't, he started his own gym from scratch
Yeah.
the same way that I would eventually have to do. And so he knew I wanted to do that the whole time. So he would, he was awesome because he took, with all of his employees, but I know what I know for the time that I had with him, he was constantly teaching me, constantly pointing out things to me to hopefully do or not do based off of what he's learning in that moment, and the types of things that they were doing at their gym. So I was always improving my coaching skills there, but I was always learning a lot of the business side of things from him specifically because he was very generous with anything you can imagine.
Gotcha.
He always went out of his way. And I remember because he would do yearly meetings, and I think every 6 months he would meet with us about the state of where we are, how we're doing in our job, and what the plans are for the gym and how we kind of fit into that and stuff like that. And it was 2017, the review at the start of that year, where he said, where are things at in terms of you moving on and doing your own thing. And I was like, I'm kind of here. And, I was, because like I said, I was training people out of my parents' garage, but I was spending most of my day in that gym. So, could only quite do so much.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. He's like, listen, man, he's like, end of the year. He's like, you got to be done with this at the end of the year. So he was telling me, which I can safely say at the time, it was him who owned the gym, obviously, and there was 2 guys who worked under him, me and this other guy, Brian, who did a lot of the work, and really was probably some of his best assets in that gym as employees. His wife was there a lot too. She does, I think, a lot more with him now. She's just as awesome. She's amazing. But that was him telling one of the people who is very important to his business, hey, by the end of the year, I want you out of here because I want you doing your own thing. So that was very generous and selfless of him, but it also kind of put that kind of time bomb. That wasn't him saying he was going to fire me. I don't think he would have did that. But it put that time clock in my head of okay, by the end of 2018, I want to be in a position that I feel good enough that I can do that. Because he also said too, he's like, you're not going to feel ready. You're going to feel very unprepared. But he's like, you can't just wait forever. You know, it's you have to make sure there are certain things in place and you got your ducks in a row to a certain extent. But then you just have to dive in.
Yeah.
And you have to get from there. And especially because one of the awesome things about the way I did this and the way that people can own a gym or train in some extent, cost-wise, it's very low barrier entry, right? When I was training people out of my parents' garage, all it costed me was parents that didn't mind having loud music sometimes and people in their garage and neighbors that are hopefully okay with it. And for the most part, everyone agreed to that.
Gotcha.
There were certainly moments, but it didn't cost me anything. And then I just had to build up clientele, and I was able to do that from what I already had to then spending all my time doing that in that 4-month span of beginning of 2018 to April 1st when I moved into this space that we're in right now.
Boom. Okay. So this space.
Yes.
How long did it take to find a suitable space for a gym?
This happened super quick.
Okay.
Because I think maybe end of February, beginning of March, at that time, I was like, all right, I guess I should start having an eye out for a place and maybe calling numbers, seeing signs in windows and, for a lease and go from there. And like I said, I lived right up the street at the time. So I knew of this already. And I called the number, and it's a woman named Bernadette who's the landlord for this and half the buildings in Brookline, I think. Called the number and asked, price-wise and square footage-wise, because I knew I wanted up to 1,000. This is 1,000 square feet, up to 1,000 square feet, but really no more than that, because that would be what I would be able to handle price-wise probably. And she said that, and she's like, oh, well, you can come down and look. And I literally just walked down the street, and I walked into here. I met her. I came up here, and it was, it didn't look like this as it does now. But and then if I had to remember, I think I probably thought about it for a couple of days, and then I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. And then I signed the papers, and then I've been here since then. Yeah.
All right. So you went for it. You went for it, which is a huge step. Now, one of the things as I look around your gym,
yes.
There's a lot of equipment. We have some bikes in the background. There's free weights over here. There's kettlebells. Of course, none of this is on camera. We have.
It's all immaculate looking.
It is. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You got to come check it out. But I always think about this moving in. Yeah. And I'm sure it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. But when it comes to getting, there's money involved with all of this stuff. So, how was it financially? Moving things in here, getting some equipment, weights, bikes, this, that, and what was the move-in like? So let's just start with financially getting things. Because okay, I see a kettlebell down there. Kettlebells are not cheap.
This 53-pound kettlebell cost at least $80.
There you go.
At least.
One, by the way.
One kettlebell. Yeah, but the most expensive thing in this gym is the flooring.
Really?
By far. Especially, and this is just horse stall mats. I got this from Tractor Supply Store. So if it's good enough for gigantic horses and livestock, it's good enough for us. But you get real nice professional rubber flooring where it's high impact and it's a little thinner and it's perfectly flat. You outfit your gym with that. That's even just this small space. Because I remember I looked into it. That would have been at least $6,000 or $7,000, I want to say.
Jeez.
Yeah, so you can imagine how much money that guy Rick spent when he did a 7,000 square foot gym. It's a ton of money just for your flooring. And you need that. That's kind of like a non-negotiable. You need rubber, high impact flooring to protect your floor, who's below you in my case, which presents its own obstacles, but who's below you, and your equipment and things like that. So that was a huge cost. Wasn't as bad for me because I went this route. And I knew that just because I did it out of my garage for so long. That's kind of one of those things you learn online. hey, don't get the super expensive stuff. Go to a Tractor Supply store. You can line it up nice enough. And, and it's I think these were, I want to say these were either 45 or $60 per mat. So it still added up. After doing just that. Yeah. But a lot of the other equipment, and this is again where this kind of comes into play, where it's all in your control because you only have to have enough to be able to train the people appropriately that you're training. So, I could have. I have a wish list of stuff I could have, where amazing equipment that costs tens of thousands of dollars. But, typically speaking, you're going to need dumbbells at a lightweight 5 pounds I have up to 50 pounds and I have one 100-pound dumbbell and I got some adjustable stuff, but like I said, a lot of that stuff I had already beforehand. But usually dumbbells, that's at about $1 a pound. So if you have 1,000 pounds worth of dumbbells, it's at least $1,000.
There you go.
Barbells, depends on what quality you want to get. I have 3, and I have one that's they're all good enough to where they last, and for the purposes of what we do in here, no one's very few people are throwing around tons of weight. Yeah. So none of them are going to break really unless they're mistreated. But so they're all good barbells, but the cheapest of that was $250. But then that one on the end there that I love, that's a Texas Power Bar, and that costs $550. But there's barbells that cost $1,000. Yeah. And I own a small gym where I'm dealing with 8 people at a time at most, so that's the number I have. But if you're going to have a place that needs to have 7, 10, 15, 20 barbells, you can only imagine. And then the weights that go on to that, and again, probably $1 per pound on those weights. The way I did it, because I kind of grew it over time, slowly and steadily. Craigslist and stuff like that was like my best friend.
Yeah.
Because as long as this place is clean, you know, and it's organized, you don't need like the fanciest of stuff. And no one's gonna care if your dumbbell has a chip in it, you know? It's kind of nice that your dumbbell has a chip in it. It should be used. It should be getting tossed around a little bit. So, you know, there's definitely certain things I would want to buy new, but a lot of stuff you can get away with buying secondhand. And gym equipment especially is like probably like the thing you can buy secondhand from people, because everyone buys gym equipment thinking they're going to work out at their home, and then they don't. And then 5 years later they sell it because they used it twice.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. That's like very common.
Yeah. I respect it. I know one guy, a friend of mine, he was just talking about how he would get a lot of stuff off of eBay.
Yep.
And he was explaining to me kind of what you were saying, like you don't need tip top of the line stuff. And don't get it confused, by the way, if you're out there watching. This is some good stuff out here.
Yep.
But the point I'm making is, if you have something you want to go after, you do not have to necessarily break the bank. Some things are just expensive altogether.
Yep.
But you don't have to, you know, instead of spending $1,500 on something, you can still find something just as good, just as durable for maybe half the price, $750, $500, $250. So I 100% respect it, because it all contributes toward the ultimate goal, which is, you know, having your own business, training people, doing something that that you love and have control over. So, brick by brick training.
Yes.
Brick by brick training. Who does brick by brick training cater to?
So, I would say like the person, and that's a real important question too, because I think one of the huge mistakes that people make in this space is they try to cater to everyone. And if you cater to everyone, you're catering to no one. Because particularly if you're working with people hands-on, if you're working with people face-to-face, like a huge part of that is like they want to know that you care about them and that you are like invested in helping them. So if there's like no rhyme or reason as to like who you are helping and who you are trying to service, you know, then that doesn't go unnoticed. Like the people are gonna like recognize that and be like, is he like really trying to help me, or is he just like, am I just like another person compared to all these other people? So for what I do, I like to work with, you know, people who are kind of in the young to middle age, so like 30 to like 50, 60 years old. I certainly have people who are younger, and I have people who are older. But more important than the age, I would say it's people who are, by and large, not very in love with fitness and exercise, who have tried things time and time again, who hated it, and who found no success at it, and are just, they care enough about their health and well-being, usually after some sort of, you know, event or scare, or, you know, grandmother dies, they see what that was and they're like, I don't want to go down that road, you know? And so people do know enough to know that it's important to them and they should care about their health and fitness. But a lot of people don't know how to go about doing it. Or they've tried it 1,000 times and it never led them anywhere. So they finally realize, okay, I want some help. So it's a person, you know, I cater to a person that values their health and fitness enough to hire somebody to help them, but probably doesn't love to do it, and you know, is a bit lost.
Gotcha.
You know, and like I said, so that could be kind of any age, any, you know, male, female, people who are already sort of in shape, people who walk in here, people who are, you know, this is like their first time ever touching a weight in any sort of capacity.
Gotcha.
So even though a bunch of different people walk in this building, that's kind of the way I approach them, as a beginner in a sense, but I'm like always trying to like teach people and get them more, you know, in control of what they're doing, and so that they're learning, you know, in terms of what they're doing training wise, but also like nutrition wise and stuff like that too.
Which is huge. We'll get into nutrition as well. And I like that because There's many people now. I used to work out at Crunch Fitness. It closed during the pandemic.
Yep.
R.I.P. Crunch Fitness in Monroeville, because you were.
Is it gone now?
It's gone. It's empty.
Yep.
All they have left is a sign. So I go to Planet Fitness now, but I notice with places like Planet Fitness where they cater toward pretty much anybody,
Yep.
and it's cheap, it's convenient, whatever.
Yep.
But I do know you if you're a regular at the gym, you see people come and go, you see people kind of lost. And a place like this, or your philosophy, or the demographic that you cater to, I think it is beneficial, because there are people who do want to make a change, but they go to a gym and just look around, do a machine, and then default back to the treadmill because that's where they're most comfortable. Walk on there for 15 minutes and go. And it's important. It's important to get the type of help that you need versus just a general area where you're just might feel still uncomfortable in.
I'm biased because I own a gym, but I can't think of something that's more worthy of investing your time and money into as your own health. Particularly if you're a person that is unhealthy, that has tried things and has been unsuccessful. It's okay, well, are you gonna stop and quit, or just maybe, hey, I can spend a little bit of money, a little bit of time, a little bit more effort into seeking out the help of somebody on this thing that's extremely important.
So, nutrition is a big thing.
Yep.
Nutrition. I notice I follow you on Instagram, Brick by Brick Training. You'll give some tutorials. You talked about the benefit of hanging before. I started hanging.
Yeah.
Just watching.
Nice. Very good. Very good.
I just started. I'm well, let me try it. He said 20 seconds. And I'm okay, I'll get to 20 seconds. And I'm all right, I'm ready to drop.
Yeah.
I'll try to do 30, but I get to 20 and I'm okay.
Yep.
And that's the thing about, having a trainer or something like that. They can introduce you to something new and get you out of your own comfort zone.
That's a big thing for sure.
Let's talk about nutrition, though. What do you offer to people when it comes to nutrition? Because they might come in here and okay, I want to learn how to exercise, but I really never ate that well either.
Yeah. So by and large, what I do in here is the training aspect, but I'm always trying to educate people on nutrition, and I do offer nutrition, and I call it nutrition and behavior coaching, because when it comes down to nutrition, similar to training, but especially when it comes to nutrition, where people should be starting off with is way, way, way simpler than what they think. Okay. The typical normal person, where everyone knows somebody, and it's probably themselves and everyone they know, who is tried a diet, maybe it worked for a month, you lost 10 pounds, and then you couldn't sustain that, and then you go back to what you know, which is what led you to a place that you wanted to diet in the first place. And it's just this vicious cycle of seeing progress with these diets that you might try, and then you get to a point where you can't sustain it, and then you're left with nothing. So what I offer is, meeting a person where they're at in terms of their habits, their skills, and in terms of cooking and nutrition, and how much information they have on nutrition, what's healthy for them. Taking into account their lifestyle, their stressors, what their home life is what their jobs are because that's a huge thing. Some people are going to be able to commit an hour, 2 hours a day to the mental bandwidth of thinking about how to improve themselves with training and nutrition. Some people have 10 minutes of bandwidth that they can try to improve on themselves that day. And you can still get a lot done in that 10 minutes. So but you have to scale it down to what you can accomplish in that time.
Yeah.
So that, and I work with people who are here in the gym with that. That's what I like ideally the most, because you're kind of getting it from both sides, the training aspect and the nutrition. But I'll work with people online with that as well, in terms of helping them out with, like I said, their lifestyles and their habits. It's really about tweaking your habits and learning how to adjust your behaviors to service what get you where you want to get.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to throw out some hypothetical
Yes.
scenarios. I'm somebody who, I don't drink coffee, hate
Okay.
the taste of it, even if you put sugar in it and cream and all the works. I don't drink coffee. I'm one of those people who need to drink a Coca-Cola for caffeine or a Mountain Dew. Everybody knows somebody who does this.
Oh, yeah.
So
I had a guy who trained here. I'm not going to call him out, but it's funny if people here in the gym see this, then they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I love him. He doesn't train here anymore, but he was awesome. I loved having him here. But there was a guy who trained here, and like during his workouts, he would like drink Mountain Dew and stuff like that. And I got him eventually to like go to like Diet Mountain Dew, and then in his mind he thought it was better. In my mind, he went backwards, and then he started doing like these super like fruity teas and like sugary teas and stuff like that. But it reminds me of that. It makes me laugh.
Yeah. So that's crazy. Like at least you're still here. At least you're working
for
out.
sure. And that was my thing.
Yeah.
This was one of like the few like really fundamental healthy things he did. So I was like, I mean, I'm not gonna. I would like get on him about it in a playful way, but like it was important that he was here training. But like you can only imagine like drinking that during your workout. I would always be like, dude, how are you doing this? It's too sweet, all this carbonation. No.
That sounds like a cramp.
Yeah.
That sounds like a stomach cramp to me. Like
this
trying
dude
to
was
work
strong
out.
too, and he worked hard. So
Really? Oh man.
How he did it, I don't know. Everyone's different.
Superhuman. So I'm somebody, I like to drink Pepsi in the morning. I drink one with my lunch, and I have it with my dinner.
Yeah.
And my eating habits, let's say I have some vegetables sometimes, maybe a side salad with my dinner, but outside of that, it's not that great.
Yeah.
How would you, what advice would you give to somebody like that, and specifically drinking all the Pepsi for caffeine?
Yeah. So I tend to like, there's a couple ways of approaching it. One, I like people to be very sure of what they think they are like currently doing. What I mean by that is like, I see it all too often where people say like, oh, well, I eat, I eat vegetables and stuff like that. But like, how do you know that? Like, do you track it at all? Mm-hmm. Do you have any sort of like concrete data to show that what you think your behaviors are actually your behaviors? So you like a lot of times when I'm trying to help somebody out at first, I like don't even try to make any changes at all. It kind of happens as a byproduct just because they're thinking about it, but I don't put any changes into place. I say, just take like a photo of like everything you eat and drink, that because like your phone's always on you. It's easy to do. It's not something, that you have to like spend a lot of time doing. Take a photo of everything you eat and drink that day, and let's do that for like a week at least. To see one, because usually what will happen is people are typically blown away at how much more they eat than they think, the quantities of like what their portions are as opposed to like what they thought they were eating, and also just like the erratic schedule of what they eat, where people will, or sometimes people will, especially when they're starting off dieting or trying to make some nutritional changes, they will cut back way too much. And so their breakfast might look great and their lunch might look more or less great, but by the time you get after lunch, like your body is accustomed to having, X amount of calories and food that looks a certain way. Yeah. And like you cannot deny your body for only so long. And then by the time you hit like 6, 7 p.m., like you're powerless to what your body wants. Right. And then that's where you start binging and eating a whole bag of chips and then pounding down 3 beers or 3 Cokes, and then you're like, oh man, I'm just like so lost. Well, it's because you were like restricting way too much at the start of your day. So for a person like that presented like at first, track and get some confidence about like what your behaviors actually are, which usually you're gonna learn a lot just by doing that. And again, like usually by doing that, there's gonna be a lot of times where you might go to take a picture of something, you might be like, I don't need this, and then you don't even have it. So it's already a positive change right there. But then after that initial thing, unless it's a person that's like in some like dire straits in terms of their health, you know, I like to look at like low-hanging fruit, super easy wins, because training, but especially nutrition, is something that's like very stressful to change, and it seems very, you know, it's hard to do because it's something like you can't not eat.
Yeah.
Like you have to eat. So like you're gonna eat. It's like good choices, bad choices. You know, it's more about like better choices and worse choices, not necessarily good or bad. But you know, like look at that person where they are and what's like the easiest thing for them to change. That person, it might be that like trying to change them drinking that like soda with each meal could be an easy change. Like where I say like, hey, because it might be like a mouthfeel thing. It might be that simple. Like you like that carbonation. Like, okay, let's try like, you know, a diet soda instead, where you can cut back some calories that way at least, but you're still getting like a little bit of that taste, some of that mouthfeel, or like sparkling water, whatever the case is, you know, some shift in that direction. And a lot of times that's real successful right there. And then you go, okay, well now I'm minus, you know, 3 or 4 pops a day. That's like 600-700 calories.
Yeah.
You know, and you just did it by just making one little change. But sometimes a person, you know, especially if it's like, if they're not having coffee and stuff like you mentioned, and they were kind of thriving off that caffeine, that's a little trickier because now it's not as simple as like, oh, well, I like the taste of it. Now it's like, oh, my body is actually like accustomed to having this amount of caffeine and stuff like that. So then where you go there, you probably just try to partition out some of those sodas. Maybe like you don't take it away, but you have a little bit less of it, or you have one less of it a day. It's like such a minuscule change, and it takes some buy-in at first for a person to like trust that it's going to pay off. But the benefit is like it's much easier than like making wholesale changes.
Yeah.
You know, and then you just keep on repeating that process of like little tweaks. You know.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for answering that hypothetical too. I like that too, like taking the picture of stuff for a week. Sometimes I know personally where I notice I'm like, all right, why does my stomach look like this? Like, why am I? And I don't take a picture. I'm conscious of what I eat, but at the same time, if I notice I gained a little bit more weight than I necessarily wanted to, I'll think back. I'm like, well, what have I had in the past? Okay, we went here and I got this, and then when you think about it, you realize you may be eating a little bit more, way more carbs than you want to eat, or not enough vegetables, things like that. But I really like that idea of taking a picture of what you're eating for a week to really track.
Because like there's like a lot of tracking apps like MyFitnessPal and stuff like that, and they're great, and some people love to do that. But for like your typical average person, a lot of those numbers aren't going to really mean much at first for somebody. So like knowing the amount of calories they're eating, the protein, the carbs, the fats, like more important at first will be just to have some awareness of like what you're eating, what your meals look like, you know, like what your plate looks like. Are you actually sitting down and spending time eating, or are you like eating on the go constantly? Like there's that mindfulness word is a big one that you'll see in health and fitness, and I think sometimes people just kind of like say it without like really diving into like how important it is. But like it really comes down to that, like a person, you know, being aware and active in like what they're doing, you know. Sometimes people just tune out. Yeah. And sometimes you might tune out for like a couple seconds, but sometimes you tune out for the whole day. Yeah. And you don't know like where the day went in terms of like what you're eating and drinking.
All right. So let's transition. Yeah. Okay, into the fitness industry. Yeah. And there's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of information on the internet, and there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. And I think I personally hate the fitness industry. Yeah. And that's kind of like, it's a blanket statement, but not true. Yeah. But I hate, oh my gosh, I hate seeing weird, I'm not into TikTok, but like I'll see TikToks on Instagram. I'll see weird TikToks of these young kids doing all sorts of weird stuff in the gym. Like this, I don't know how it motivates these young guys, but some way it does. You know, like, what do you call it? Shotgunning pre-workout cans and stuff like this. What advice would you give? I don't know where exactly I'm going with this, But more so, what advice would you give to people, or forget that, forget the advice. What don't you like about the fitness industry? Well, let me see if I can get an ally here.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I think because it's kind of like lumped in with like social media.
Yeah.
To where like it's because your social media can kind of look a lot of different ways, and you can kind of just end up in a place where you didn't want to end up in terms of like what your interests are and like the people that you're scrolling and seeing and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of because of that, like what I hate about the fitness industry is it's not talking to like real people, like normal everyday people. It's a lot of extremes. It's a lot of, it's a lot of buzzwords that are getting people interested in things that they think they should be interested in, but don't actually move the needle that much in terms of like what's important. And so it's like a lot of like disingenuous production towards people that think they want to look a certain way. I mean, because there's no shortage of just like incredibly ripped guys and girls on there that say like, this is how I got here, which half the time they're lying anyways.
Yeah.
But also like most people like don't actually want to look like that. They think they do until you realize like what it actually takes to look like that. So, and they don't tell you what it takes to look like that. They say like, oh, well, you buy this and this is how you look like this.
Yeah.
So that's a huge problem. So just like the dishonesty, I think, is like a real big thing.
Yeah.
And just like not talking to people about like what is really important with stuff like that.
All right, so thank you for everything.
Yeah,
Thanks for opening up your gym and everything, and giving us the time to talk about Brick by Brick. You can catch us, where are we at again?
Brookline.
Brookline.
Yes.
My in-law lives over this area. I'm
Yeah.
horrible at not knowing this is what it's called.
Whereas like me, I don't like to cross the river.
Really?
So I just stay around here.
Yeah. So we're in the Brookline area, Brick by Brick training.
Yeah.
Dylan, thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Any
man.
last words? Any shout outs? Any?
I could shout out a ton of people. I would say if anyone who currently goes to the gym watches this, I want to thank you for, trusting me and being here and kind of, helping me do something that I love doing so much. And, that's really a big part of all of this is the community aspect of like what the gym is about. And the success of it is obviously a lot on me, but a lot of it is just good people being in here and interacting in a way that's like positive. So a huge shout out to them. And that's a big thing. And there's tons of other things. I could ramble on for like forever. And like there's tons of like different things I have opinions about, but that's the big one, I'd say.
All right. And you can catch his opinions on the Brick by Brick Instagram.
Yes.
So check it out. We're with Coach today. Thanks again. This is the Cool Hand Podcast, something you got to deal with. Easy.